Hi everyone, we hope you enjoyed the following podcast. Just a quick disclaimer that there will be topics covered such as eating disorders in this, so if you are sensitive, please click away now. Thank you so much, we hope you have a good time. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome to the R.E.A.L podcast where real talk meets real health. I'm Matthew Rigoni.
I'm Max Dennehy.
Your dietitian duo ready to have a chat about the crazy world of health and nutrition. Max, this is our first official podcast. We've done some unofficial podcasts in the past.
We have.
Tell me about what we're talking about today.
Yeah, well, it's good to get off the ground, I think, firstly, and it's exciting because we've had, we've tried things, we've been interested in doing this, but it's good to officially be like launching. Would you agree with that, Matt?
Very excited, very excited. Yeah, a lot of word of mouth consultations for the first couple of months, and then officially launching to the greater public, which is super stoked about. Yeah, able to provide a really good service to a large range of people now. So keen to get going. So the purpose of the podcast, have a chat about general health things. Today, you mentioned before we were keen on chatting about something to do with food.
Yeah, go figure, I guess. Yeah, for today, we're going to keep it nice and general, more of an intro kind of podcast, kind of a bit more of a chat, I'd say. And then we're going to really get stuck into it straight away. There's no point in mucking around as what me and Matt think. So we're going to actually start is it 5 podcast series or 4 podcast series, Matt? Could even be more.
Something like that. We'll see.
Yeah, so it'll be a series where there'll be a part 1, part 2, etc. for about 5 or 6 parts. And it's going to be going over what R.E.A.L means to us and going through everything about that. So they're definitely the best. They're actually already filmed, but we just thought we'd get this one together to create essentially a welcome.
Yeah, a nice little framework for the coming little chats we're going to have.
Absolutely. Yeah. So introduce today's topic, Matt, for us, and then let's get stuck in, I'd say.
So I think we were talking about before, Max, how do I tell if a meal is healthy or not?
That's a good question.
Very loaded question there. Take it away, Max.
Yeah, well, there's just it's not just to sound like, I think, what is it? Your English teacher, I think the meme is your English teacher gets one sentence and they try and break it down for the next term. Is that, like, I'm pretty sure that's the meme, right?
From my understanding, it was one sentence and break it down for the next 6 years, but like something along those lines.
So I feel like we're going to be a little bit like that this podcast, in that we have one sentence and we're going to be breaking it down for an extended amount of time. But hopefully we do it just, and that we actually stay entertaining throughout that. But yeah, it is such an interesting question. What does a healthy meal mean? What does it mean? In my opinion, even breaking down the word healthy is quite difficult, but it's going to be very situationally dependent. And I'd say you would agree, Matt. Is that right?
Well, that's extremely accurate to what I would agree with at the moment. Let's break that down in terms of what does healthy actually mean. That's probably a good starting point.
Yeah, for sure. And something that Matt and I have very similar. We certainly have differences with our opinions, but we share very similar views on this specific topic of the word healthy. What we think it means, and the positives and negatives of using that word, and also how it's quite a loaded word as well, in that everyone has their own assumptions regarding what does healthy mean. Personally, I don't like to use the word healthy for a few different reasons. Matt, could you list some of the reasons why we don't like that?
I find trouble with it just because it seems like it's an on or off. It's like something is healthy or isn't healthy. It's like, is alcohol healthy or not? Well, there's no nuance in it. It doesn't depend on dosage. It's like a yes or a no. Is a potato healthy or not? Well, like, to a starving person, fucking absolutely. It's absolutely healthy. The healthiest thing you can give them, with a lot of caveats. Versus if someone who, let's say, has an excess energy problem, who eats a lot of potatoes, well, maybe a potato isn't the choice of food or the right tool for the job. I think it's one of those situations where it just has so many emotional attachment cues from the greater public, where it's very difficult to separate the emotion from the actual fact of, is this healthy for the actual situation, or is it just healthy in general?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you've hit the nail on the head for probably our main complaint with the word in general. Not actually the word healthy that seems to be problematic, but probably the antonym, which would be unhealthy. In that really creates a binary sort of market, in that if it's not healthy, it must be unhealthy, which means that it must be bad. And so I think there's problems in that way of thinking, and that way of thinking leads to quite a few issues. And it also again, it doesn't mean it's situational, in that depending on very different situations, a food could be considered more desirable for someone and less desirable for a completely different person. I think the potato was a good example, especially like a deep fried potato where it's got more calorie dense. Someone who needs a lot of calories, that could be a good option for them, and vice versa for someone who is overweight or obese, potentially not going to be a good option moving forward. So I completely agree in that it creates a binary sort of space, and we probably want to get away with. Probably want to transition away from that style of thinking in the nutrition sphere.
Yeah, absolutely. Just it's acknowledging that healthy is complicated. It's not just a yes or no. Like I was explaining to a client in the last couple of weeks or so, they were asking me, okay, well, is it okay if I have like noodles? I'm like, okay, well, let's break it down. What are noodles for you? What does it provide? What is it giving you versus what is it displacing? What is it taking place of? So in the individual's case, it was the packet of noodles was replacing an entire meal's worth of like a wide variety of fruit, veg, and basically a complete healthy meal plate, which was not working towards their goals. So again, like really reiterating on that binary system of healthy versus unhealthy. And then of course, okay, well, if it's unhealthy, then I can never have it. Well, that's not appropriate at all, because noodles might be a really good source of carbohydrates for someone who's going for a run the next day or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I think I really agree. I think that's a nice transition as well, in that you could definitely frame it. I definitely prefer spectrum-based thinking, in that it does sit on the spectrum as to being more favorable versus less favorable. But also that there could be that more binary way of thinking, just like you mentioned, where is it helping me achieve the goals that I'm after? And by no means do those goals have to be that you need to be extreme disciplined and some super champion sport person. The goals might be, I want to be happier. So if you are potentially eating something that's going to be making you happier and is going to increase your happiness long term, then that is achieving your goals. What do you think about that, Matt?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I think it's definitely underrated in terms of that food relationship that people have and the damage that a bad relationship can have on your entire way of life. So another one of my clients recently came up to me. Is like, oh, how do I enjoy like an event where I'm like I'm on this weight loss journey? How do I enjoy like a celebration where I can have a cake? And then like, how do I fit that into it? I'm like, well, there's pros and cons to every situation. The pros are that you get to enjoy the cake, and it may put a very, very slight dent in your progress. But realistically, like if your weight loss journey is like a kind of like a little bit of a bumpy hill on the down towards your goals, that little bump is going to be very tiny compared to the overall broad progress that's going on. There's pros and cons to every situation. That's really what we try to get across with multiple different areas of health and nutrition, that there is never a one perfect situation. There's always negatives associated. It's just choosing the right one that fits you for your time and for your life at that point.
And this is really interesting. This is making me giggle inside, because we're beginning to ramble here. And no one would know this, but except for us, really, we started a podcast called Dietitians Ramble, because as we didn't mention, Matt, that we're both dietitians. I'm going to put that on you, considering you're meant to be the
I thought I mentioned it in the intro
guy. Dietitian
duo.
But I guess it's been said now. So, but yes, dietitian in the sense that it's very interesting that you say that, because I'm very on the fence about that. In that I used to be of your opinion 100% that, so what? Have one day off. Who cares? No biggie. Get back on the horse the next day. But I think, again, it's going to be that's fine for us to say. But the power that I've seen momentum build with some of my clients is unbelievable. And when that momentum breaks, when that train, like I like to do the analogy of like a train going, because obviously the train's got plenty of momentum. When that train stops, and it doesn't have to stop for long, even if it's a day, boy, is it hard to get those wheels churning again. And I think there's something to be said for that. Whilst for sure we can try things out, and if there's a celebration day or a party or whatever it is, to have those immediate recommendations and general recommendations of relax, enjoy the food, have a good time, get back on the horse tomorrow. But it's going to be, again, very, very client centered and client based, in that if this honestly doesn't work well for you, and having that break doesn't work well for you, in that the 1 day break turns into a 5 day break, which turns into a 3 week break, then it may be better for your personality type to continue being strict throughout the entire weight loss phase until you achieve your goals. What do you think about that, Matt?
I was about to absolutely dig into you and call you a bunch of expletives, but the more you explained it, the more I tended to agree. So completely agree that it is highly individual of what kind of personality you have. Is this a suitable method of you moving forward with the kind of, like you're on a really strict kind of lifestyle, and then a little bit of cake every now and then is enough to throw you off? Or maybe we should reassess the situation. Is the cake the problem, or is it the lifestyle that you're trying to achieve going to be inhibiting your kind of goals? And again, it really does depend on what your goals are and what your expectations are of your journey. Do you expect
it comes down.
Sorry, please go on, Max.
Yeah, no, it comes down to one of the links in the chain is broken. There's an issue somewhere, and it's a matter of let's find that issue. That issue could be that your personality type is that you can't do those breaks. That's just not how you function. It could be that maybe your dieting phase is so hard, as soon as you have that little break, you just like fall into a heap because you've been so wound up and stressed and built, like you're essentially wound up like crazy, that once you get that initial chance to relax, you just completely relax. So it might be about toning down the dieting phase as well, so it's not so stressful and difficult. Yeah,
absolutely. And then it totally depends on if it is a dieting phase or if it's more of a continual approach to managing your relationship with food. Because your kind of clientele will be more focusing on that specific period of phase. If anybody doesn't know, Max's clientele is primarily to do with sport performance and body composition, which tend to be certain blocks of dietary patterns, where mine tend to be more the lifestyle and longevity focused with a sustainability approach. But again, we delve into each other's realms fairly often.
It's interesting. Yeah, we absolutely do. And it's interesting that because I've changed my views on that quite recently after hearing a few people talk on this very subject, in that if your goal is to lose weight, you should not feel like that weight loss, or no, you can, but it's not a requirement to feel like that weight loss phase is sustainable, because you're not planning to do it long term. There's no long-term aspirations to stay in this diet. The aspirations are, I'm going to get in, I'm going to lose my weight, and I'm going to get out. And that's when the sustainability actually happens. So I totally understand what you mean. And that there's so many people that think the way that you think, and especially the way that I used to think as well, in that. So there's no, I'm not trying to discredit it, but it does feel like a little bit people are trying to pander to that you must feel happy and good at all times almost. And that we can acknowledge that if you're in a dieting phase, it can really suck at times. And that if we just acknowledge that and be like, look, this is temporary, this is a short-term thing to achieve your goal, and then we can readjust. What do you think about that, Matt?
Completely depends on the goal. Yeah. So if it's one of those situations, can you go through a very strict period of time and then maintain or reach your goal? And then what's the point from there? Is it maintenance? Is it building back up? Is it losing further weight from there? Is it ramping up the weight loss? Is it a range of different options? I think it's completely dependent on that kind of situation.
I guess for me, I wouldn't be disillusioned. If I was someone trying to lose weight, I wouldn't be disillusioned in thinking that if you think this is really, you're going through a difficult time or it's really hard, I wouldn't be disillusioned to think that, oh, this is permanent. This is what it's going to be like for the rest of my life, because it won't be. Once you've achieved that weight loss, the calories will come back up and everything will be more or less back to normal.
Come back up to what level there, Max?
Whatever deficit you were in, really. You shouldn't have experienced, if you've been working with someone who actually knows what they're doing, you shouldn't have experienced any muscle loss. So there shouldn't be any changes to your basal metabolic rate at all. there also shouldn't be many changes that I would conceive of in changes of NEAT or those other aspects that encompass your entire total daily energy expenditure. So essentially, the calories should come back up to a level similar to what they were prior to dieting. So you should be able to lose your weight as long as you're within a reasonable body fat percentage and not experience long-term symptoms, in my opinion.
It's interesting how you've posed that. From what I can gather, the weight loss period from your perspective tends to be over a relatively short amount of time, to probably weeks to months, in like 2 to 3 months.
Definitely months.
Yeah.
Well, minimum. It depends how much weight, but it's going to be around about that 0.5% per week, 0.25 to 0.5% of weight per week. So 100 kilo person, anywhere between 250 grams to 500 grams a week is what I think would be good. Probably more leaning on the 500 gram side, because 250 grams is probably not much. And that's how much you lose per week, and how much weight you need to lose will depend on the length of the diet. So if it's 5 kilos, it could be 10 weeks. But if it's maybe 10 kilos or 20 kilos, it could be stretched over a year or a year and a half, depending on how many diet breaks they need, a range of different factors. There could even be periods where we allow that client to go a couple of kilos back up, just so they feel comfortable. Because sometimes it's a good idea to, if your goal was 90 kilos, go down to 88 kilos and then allow yourself to come back up, which will what will naturally happen for most people.
It's very interesting, your opinion, how it's changed over time. I don't necessarily disagree, but I think it's on the minority of how majority of people function in terms of the long-term approach. I think doing a kind of dieting phase and then kind of taking their foot off the wheel, forgetting about everything, may just end up to where they were before, if not additional, in terms of weight.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't see how that would technically work. You've worked with someone, you've gained an insurmountable amount of knowledge in this area, and you have gained all the skills that you have over the previous few months. You should be at a knowledge basis and skill basis to be able to manage yourself to continue staying that same weight long term.
Very interesting, Max. I don't know if I fully agree.
What is it that you disagree?
I think that it's more of just an extended yo-yo.
How?
Clinical judgment. It's an inside joke that clinical judgment was used in the hospitals for any kind of situations where you have absolutely no idea how to answer the problem, but your experience and opinions are taken into a clinical setting, and it's like, apparently my clinical judgment is the dictator of my decision here.
Apparently that's as good as evidence in a clinical setting.
Apparently. Look, I don't disagree that it's not like bad evidence. I think it's like a good type of evidence in some aspect, but you might as well just say it's my opinion.
Yeah,
I think it's fancying up, changing the word.
It's a fancy way of saying my opinion. Exactly. Yeah. Look, I guess for me, without being too much of a dick, as to answer your question, rather than just saying how, I don't think so at all, because the whole goal of working with someone is you're developing their skills, you're teaching them, you're educating them, you're teaching them. You have that extended period, ideally after they've done the diet, then you relearn how to stay the same weight. This whole concept of yo-yo dieting is like caricatured by people in the like non-dieting sphere. I don't even know what it's called now, weight inclusive sphere. Because it acts like people gain weight at a rapid rate, which they don't. People gain weight really slowly over a long period of time. That's just the only time you'd gain weight really rapidly would be like if you had done a diet that was like extreme and you would just bounce back up. But that's not what we're doing. So you wouldn't gain back rapidly. At worst, you would gain back slowly, but you've already developed all those skills to be able to pick it up before you actually gain any real amount of weight. Like, let's say with this case study, this guy was 100 kilos. He got down to 80 kilos because he would have gained all those skills and knowledge of that, he should be weighing himself frequently. He should be, he has a good understanding of how much he should be eating. if he does hit 82 or 83, he's going to be able to realize that, recognize that he's gained some weight, and re-implement all those skills to get back down to 80 kilos very quickly and manage himself at that weight.
I don't disagree with that statement. I think that's probably a lot of information where I was kind of not acknowledging from your opinion from before. I think it's extremely important to note that with specifically what we offer through R.E.A.L, it's that it's an education journey where we're teaching you the skills to manage your certain condition for the long term. So if you wanted to go through a specific weight loss period and then go into maintenance, that's perfectly fine. If you want to go through an extended, more let's say intuitive, I don't really know how to describe it, more intuitive approach where it's kind of making some, again, healthier, if you're listening to this, I'm putting massive quotation marks, healthier decisions for the long term, which eventually result in some positive weight association. That's not positive in kilos, positive as in it's a good thing. It's highly dependent on the individual, but yeah, I think there's aspects which can be important in both. I think the most important thing is learning the ability to control your own function, because you are in control of your own body and you can control a lot of things. You have the power to take control of your life. It's not out of your hands. It's just that some things might be inhibiting you from reaching your goals, and we're here to find out how to appropriately apply health and nutrition strategies to get around those things, remove the inhibitions, and reach your goals over time.
Yeah, totally. And I guess it comes down to that, what people want at the end of the day.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Matt, you'll be well aware. I don't think I've ever had a client come to me wanting that, and that could just be because of the sphere I'm in. But I always have clients coming to me with, I want to be X number of kilos. And I personally don't like that. I disagree with that. I've never told myself I want to be X number of kilos, because you have no idea what X number of kilos even looks on you.
Yeah.
And it literally is just a number at the end of the day.
Yeah.
For sure, it's great guidance in that we can track how much you've gained or lost by the X number of kilos. But it means nothing other than that, other than the difference between. So yeah, I personally don't like it, but if we are able to, I think the big downside is that I've never had anyone come to me and be like, look, I want to do this. I've got no idea what weight I want to end up at. Let's just see if we can eat as healthy as we can, and we'll see how we go from there.
It's quite interesting, the difference between your clientele and mine there, Max, because I would say that a good 30-40% just say, hey, I want to be healthier, which is an amazing starting point, because then you can really kind of move towards the direction where your clinical judgment can play in a factor and potentially move them into a more productive method and use of their time, compared to if they were to be like, hey, I want to be this weight by 3 weeks time, and you're like, hold the fuck up. We can't do that in a safe manner at all. Let's take take a step back and do this realistically. What's going to happen after that 3 weeks time? I think we both agree very strongly that rapid weight loss results in rapid problems.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that so there's definitely people out there that want that, and that's more power to them if that's what you desire, to just feel healthier, and then wherever the weight goes kind of thing. I think if you had clients where the weight was going up and you didn't want it, there wasn't planned to, what would be the course of action?
I think that requires a little bit of analysis into what's actually going on. Is it that your relationship has improved and that's what your goal was with food, relationship with food? Or is it being, hey, I want to gain muscle and I'm of an X percentage of weight? And that's perfectly reasonable, because that could be a good portion of that weight could be muscle. But then we should also look at the entire situation. Is it potentially that we're eating just a total higher volume of food? Because if we're moving from highly refined carbohydrate sources for the majority of your intake, and you switch to a lot of vegetables all at once, that fiber intake is going to massively increase the amount of total water and fiber volume inside your gut. That could be a good 2 to 3 kilos of total mass Probably overestimating a little bit there. And then like if you're going from a relatively low carbohydrate diet to a very relatively high carbohydrate diet, again with that glycogen intake, that's probably a good, how much do we estimate at max? It's like a good 4 to 5 kilos of water that you hold between the low carb to high.
I can't remember those exact numbers, but it is significant. It's a significant amount of weight so yeah, I would say I would estimate around that as well. It's just a significant amount of weight, more than what you'd think. So yeah, it's interesting. I think, yeah.
It's definitely an approach where we know what's, here we go again with the word, I'm using quotation marks for these people listening. What's healthy is generally that excess adiposity is not inducive of good health outcomes. If that's not what your priority is and you don't care about those specific health outcomes, all the power to you. That's your decision. We're here to provide the information. You're here to decide what's good for you because you're your own person.
Yeah. 100%. Oh, it's interesting because I did happen to stumble upon an Instagram post of a lady who was in a healthy weight range. Absolutely, her BMI would have been within a healthy weight range for sure. Matt, maybe that's something we can talk about in a future podcast, BMI, and why I actually like it, rather than I think what we see a lot of the time. No, I'll say this. I'll give a little teaser.
Sure.
What people love to see is people love to hop on the bandwagon with everything in nutrition. One person has an opinion about some shit, and everyone goes, "Oh, yes, I hate BMI too now," and that's it. Like the end, and it's never coming back. And that pendulum just swings so bad. In that, like BMI, I don't know what it was. Maybe 20 years ago, BMI was probably like the be all and end all, and now it's just gone the other way, where BMI is like worse than cancer. Using it, and you've just given someone AIDS kind of thing. So, it's really not that bad at all. But yeah, we can go into that. What I was talking about was, yes, the lady with the Instagram post. So she was almost definitely within a healthy weight range, almost certainly. She posted, that was a before picture, and the after picture on Instagram was her quite overweight, potentially obese. Doesn't really matter. I'm not here to analyze, but point being was that the before photo was a sad photo and the after photo was a happy photo because her relationship with food had improved significantly. And it just really did get me thinking quite a lot, because it's a little bit jarring, to say the least. No, not to say the least. To be honest, it's a little bit jarring. And obviously, we all know what Instagram is like. The comments were unbelievably unhinged. But more to the point, it really did get me thinking, and thinking about it critically as to, this is a really gray zone. Really, really gray zone, in that we obviously understand the importance of a positive relationship with food, and how a bad relationship with food can be so damaging. But it's got to be combined. There's got to be a mixture and consideration with someone's physical health as well. Does that spark anything for you, Matt? Is there anything that you go, well, that was interesting?
The entire concept of relationship with food is extremely interesting. I think if it's causing you such emotional distress that like you have chronically elevated inflammation levels and you can't function on a daily basis, then absolutely, I think that moving towards improving that relationship over the cost of almost everything else is probably the best thing for you in that situation. There is a lot of nuance to that.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to be the best for you long-term health-wise, in terms of specifically related to just biological health outcomes. Of course, it's going to have a massive impact in terms of potential rates of, and I'm trying to be delicate with the situation, like rates of self-harm or rates of suicidality, which tend to be quite a large problem in today's modern society. And of course, we're trying to address what's the biggest barrier for you to reach your goals and be content with your life. And I think that's probably another topic for another day. What's the difference between contentness and happiness? I think that's a very interesting topic and something to look into. Anyways, we'll get back to it. I usually put all the information and knowledge and expertise that I have on the table for the client to decide. This is what's going to happen if we go down this route. This is what's going to happen if we do this. We can choose a balance in between. We can throw it all out the window. It is really up to you. Here's what I would recommend. Usually, it tends to be a balance between what they want and what I'd recommend. I find that works out really well in terms of matching their health outcomes and matching their own mental health outcomes for both physical and mental. But again, it's such an interesting and delicate area where it really does depend on multiple different factors.
Yeah, that's it. And the reality is that both sides they're both downsides at the end of the day. Having being in having a really poor relationship with food is bad. Being in an overweight or obese body is bad. There needs to be, for me, it was just more like, this isn't a one or the other situation. This isn't an either or. You don't have to, just because you go having a poor relationship with food, just because you go from having a poor relationship with food doesn't mean that the next logical step for you is to become overweight or obese. There is the option. And I think this is where there needs to be more, like, I don't know, is there enough discussion around that there's the option for her to improve her relationship with food without gaining significant amounts of weight? Do you think that would have been?
Definitely there is. Absolutely. I think it's more so that we're just seeing the side of Instagram where it's the jarring thing that attracts likes and or comments, where I think majority of people who improve their relationship with food will not have like in quotes, extreme weight gain of any kind. It will probably be just like a gradual improved relationship, potentially a little bit of weight gain, but that's probably positive weight gain too, assuming that there's some level of let's say eating patterns that are of the disordered nature. Positive weight gain in terms of we're actually gaining some muscle, which is extremely important for health outcomes. We can go into a whole podcast based on that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of back in the day, after I'd been training for a little while, probably 2 years, I think, I followed a lady called Stephanie Buttermore, and she did a whole series. I think she's still doing it. I don't keep up with her. I haven't kept up with her for years now, probably 6 years, 5 years, where she went what she termed it as all in. And she was someone who was chronically at unbelievably low body fat percentages for even for a man almost. It was like early teens, I remember, to mid-teens for a woman, which is unbelievably low. And with her, there wasn't necessarily, I can't remember the exact details, but she essentially just decided one day that she was over it. She had enough, and she decided to go all in, meaning that she was going to be unrestricted with her diet. And she did inevitably gain a big chunk of weight. What happened with her weight was, I think, very interesting in that it went, it was low, it went up, spiked quite high, and then that phased down, and it was back to her where she probably should have been that whole time. In that she just went back to a regular healthy body fat percentage, mid-20s, let's say. For me, I really look at that little spike period where she went up as completely avoidable and simply irresponsible almost. I don't know if I'm being too harsh, but what would be a lot better, in my opinion, would be to not have that crazy spike and just to gradually go up until you meet your appropriate body fat percentage that would be appropriate for you, and then you just flatline rather than having this giant. What do you think about that, Matt?
I think that when I was in year 7, I should have been buying Bitcoin instead of mucking around and playing downball. Mistakes have been made by many people, and I think it's an inevitability of life that mistakes do happen, but it's more so what do we do to rectify those mistakes afterwards? And I think that's probably the outcome of that situation with this person who I have absolutely no idea who she is. There's no client relationship build. From my understanding, it sounds like it's moving back to what a more realistic approach is to reach her specific goals.
Yeah, it just seems crazy, and it's for me, it kind of like reminds me of that in that it's hard to put into words other than what I've just said. It's just not something that I think is productive in any way, really. I think that if you have problems with your food, sort them. Like, if you have relationship with like issues with your relationship with food, do your best to sort them out. 100%. That's a massive priority, but it doesn't mean that everything else goes out the window.
I think there's definitely a balance from both. I think if you go on off switch, like it is so easy to do with the yo-yo style dieting, where it's like, hey, I'm cutting out this entire food group. Okay, well that will result in this outcome. It's very simple to be like X equals Y, compared to the multifaceted and very complex nature of life, how everything is complicated and influencing each other. I can't remember where I was going with this tangent, but it's more so along the lines of having something that is balanced is extremely hard to achieve, especially with someone who is extremely restrictive from a certain kind of angle. So that on-off switch might be why you would see that yo-yoing from even that health aspect.
Yeah, but again, then it comes down to that point of that, because I agree that's the main issue, right? The balance is a really difficult thing for people who struggle with their relationship with food. But there is the element of that you're just replacing one disordered eating with another disordered eating. If you've gained a significant amount of weight in a short amount of time, sure, it's not that typical disordered eating that we usually look at, such as, your anorexias, bulimias, etc. But if you've gained an incredible amount of weight in a very short amount of time, there's red flags, there's issues there. And there's got to be something said for that, then, other than just, oh, I'm happy now because I'm not, I don't feel horrible. Like, I don't know if I'm making any sense. It is late at night.
It is definitely getting late. I think it's more so she's made a judgment call for what's best for her in that situation, and then she's reassessed at a later point and then made a different judgment call. It's probably where you could simply put it down to.
No, I don't think so, because I think that as someone because I totally get exactly that paradigm shift for this curve, in that anyone who's lost weight knows how lost a significant amount of weight, and especially if you've gotten to a point where you're well below what you are usually comfortable at, those cravings and the amount of food attention that you have, attention to food that you have, are just unbelievable, and it's so easy to just spike straight up. So I get it. I totally get how that can happen very easily without much self-control. Without a significant amount of self-control, that can happen very easily. So I totally get it, but I think it's something that shouldn't be promoted.
Oh, I completely agree that it shouldn't be promoted. I think that would be quite unproductive. It is getting late to reach your goals in terms of the long term and short term. There's definitely a balance that can be approached, but like I've mentioned before, people make mistakes through life, and it's probably what we do to rectify those mistakes that matter the most, rather than preventing them. Well, of course you prevent them from happening in the first place, but nobody's perfect.
Yeah. I guess that's my point, is that we've had so many people would have made that exact same mistake, that they've done this, they've realized, oh shit, went a bit overboard. I usually actually should sit around here. You can witness them doing that. You can see them doing it. You can hear about them doing it. And you go, okay, well, look, that happens to just about everyone. Let's really ease into it, rather than just go all in. I can eat whatever I want. No restrictions on food, no restrictions on the amount of food. Just everything just like going crazy. And there just needs to be more critical eye on that. Like, that's quite irresponsible, especially from someone in the sphere of that you're meant to be preaching health and fitness.
If you're of a body fat percentage where you're not producing adequate hormones to fuel and run your body in what is normally known as a healthy manner, I'm not entirely sure if you should be listening to the health advice.
No, I think no, I disagree.
Okay, interesting. Max, how do people move towards actually attaining that gradual health? Like, if you were to say what is a healthy meal, how would we actually achieve that in terms of that long-term stability of?
We got so distracted, didn't we?
We definitely did.
Okay, so the question, sorry.
What's a healthy meal, Max?
Yeah, so look, I guess the soundbite answer is your typical Australian guide to healthy eating meal, which is half the plate of non-starchy veggies, quarter of the plate of carbohydrates, which also includes starchy veggies, quarter of the plate of a lean protein, and a very small portion of an unsaturated fat. That very small portion could be like a tablespoon or like a thumb size if it's like a amount of avocado or whatever it is, small handful of nuts or something along those lines. And that's your typical healthy meal. Coincidentally, well, not really coincidentally, funnily enough, I guess you could say, that kind of also works for everything else, which is just super interesting in that you can just prescribe that meal to just like everyone and it just works for everything. It's like bodybuilding, it works. Everything, it just works for everything. Like it's very rare you have case scenarios where like that meal doesn't work. Have you noticed that as well, Matt?
Well, I think there's definitely a lot of situations where it wouldn't be as optimal as some other instances. Like if you were to say be running a relatively low for a bodybuilding standard grams per protein of 1.2 grams per kilogram of your daily kind of life, and then running that through the kind of healthy meal plate model, you could still probably get pretty similar in terms of reaching that healthy plate model, but not exactly going higher than that. You may say if you're going into a dieting phase for that bodybuilding prep, you may need to increase that protein to a fair bit higher than that 1.2, especially if you're a trained individual.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the whole quarter plate versus half plate, etc., is that it doesn't actually give you amounts. So considering bodybuilders are going to be having much more food than your average person, quarter plate actually kind of makes it so that it ends up being more than 1.2. I don't know if that makes sense. So like a non-bodybuilder's plate is going to be like just a regular person's plate is just going to be like a regular person sized meal. But most likely a bodybuilder's plate is going to be significantly bigger, considering that they probably have more muscle mass to start with. So their metabolism is higher, as well as they're probably expending a lot more energy, considering they go to the gym every single day. Or most days, and they potentially are doing some cardio as well on top of that. So there's all those elements, which means that their average meal size is going to be significantly bigger, which means that a quarter of the plate for them is also significantly more, which means that they'll be eating even more lean protein. Do you agree? Does that logic make sense, Matt?
I mean, I agree to a certain extent. Yeah, I think it makes sense from a few aspects. I think that some bodybuilders might find the satiety cues quite overwhelming, especially in the dieting phase. So that kind of starchy vegetable portion may tend to decrease in the larger, let's say, more complex carbohydrate sources like your broccoli, your kale, your tomatoes, and things along those lines. That tends to take up a little bit more just from a total volume perspective. I think it's generally a really good starting point for a lot of people. Like if you're going to say, hey, you need to eat a healthy plate model before your 20-kilometer run tomorrow, because I think it's probably good towards your long-term health outcomes. I don't think that's entirely appropriate. I think you should probably be a little bit more focused on those starchy veg like the potatoes and white bread, even if you wanted to.
Yeah. It's a good point. That's a good point. That it's a good starting position. And again, it's gonna differ. So like if you're someone who, I always say, and potentially controversially so, show me someone who's overweight or obese who sticks to that plate model strictly. But if you're someone who is in a position where they're not losing weight on that model, it's very simple. Like I addressed in my Instagram last week, take out some carbohydrates, take out a bit of that food which is got some calories in it, and fill it up with veggies instead, and then see how you go from there. That's always an option as well. So I agree 100%. It's a starting point, and you'll adjust from there moving forward, as to which areas you need to shuffle around.
It's probably just one of those situations where it's a tool in our many tooled arsenal that we can address and use towards reaching your health outcomes. I think for a majority of the people in Australia, I think it will be probably positive changes that generally comes from that. There's a range of serves that you can have in terms of recommendations per day, and it really does range on your age and your activity levels. And if there's so many different situations where it can have modifiable factors. But for our age group, being the 19 to 50-year-old males, vegetables and legumes is 6 serves per day. Fruit is 2 serves per day. Grain and cereals, 6 serves per day. That's mostly whole grains. Lean meat and poultry, fish, eggs, nut, things along those lines that are protein sources, 3 serves. Milk and yogurt, 2.5. And approximate number of additional serves from discretionary choices, meaning anything you want to have, can be up to 3, but probably leaning towards more of the 0 if you're focused on that specific health goals and you've got goals in mind.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Matt, the soundbite is definitely that plate model. But yeah, in terms of what does a healthy meal look like, it's unbelievably varied. That does the job for 95% of people, and that's what you can prescribe, and that will be healthy options for them, and produce long-term positive health outcomes. But it's going to be so different for so many of those niche areas that we could ramble on about for a long time.
Absolutely. And it definitely doesn't have to be that specific meal structure for every single meal of the day. I think that would be quite interesting to have a lot of people trying to switch to a breakfast where it's not your kind of
I think it's fine.
Cereal. Oh, I think it's fine, absolutely too, but it's not essential to reaching your goals by any means.
I personally push my clients to implement it for all their meals. I think that's something that is important for me, in that I don't need you to be having a half a plate of veggies in the morning, but it can be, how do we get more fruit and veg into our breakfast? Because that's an area where most people don't get any. How do we get more protein into our breakfasts?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so things like, for example, if we're having, yogurt's obviously the easiest one. Just add some fruit to the yogurt. That's already quite high in protein if you're buying not dumb yogurts. Things like, eggs on toast could be, potentially taking out one of the pieces of toast, adding in an extra egg, and then adding some, potentially mushies, spinach, tomatoes, etc.
Beautiful.
To increase your veggies. For me, I really want to push the idea that breakfast shouldn't be something that's like, well, it's breakfast, so you can do whatever you want.
I completely agree. I think breakfast has been the product of the food marketing industry for a fair while now, in the sense of Kellogg's came along. It's like, hey, have my corn-based cereal. Where it's like, look, that's perfectly fine if you've got certain sport performance goals. But for a lot of people, that specific refined kind of meal may not be working towards your goals. It doesn't seem to be very satiating. I find personally, from my clients' perspectives, when you're having those kind of your quick cereals with a little bit of milk, it doesn't actually provide you much. You got a little bit of protein from the milk, but for especially someone who's led down the line in training, that protein really doesn't add much to your daily protein goals. The total cereally stuff doesn't really add too much, apart from the added fortification that's pretty much mandatory in Australia. Of course, countries vary in terms of their fortification levels. It seems like one of those areas where it's really easy to make really positive adjustments, assuming you have enough time available to prepare either the night before or an extra couple of minutes in the morning for scrambled eggs or whatever it is.
Well, I guess that's where you get the like for like replacements, in that if you're someone who already has eggs on toast, let's change a few things up. If you're someone who has a cereal, then let's move away from the cereal to more of a yogurt-based breakfast. Or there could be other options as well for quick breakfast options that could work too.
Yeah, not to say that the cereals are completely out of the question. There's definitely are cereals that are better than other or healthier than others. But like it's again one of those scenarios. What's your goal? What are we reaching towards? Is it for better blood glucose control, which is also known as blood sugar? Is it for better satiety cues, so you're not snacking all the way until lunchtime? Is it that you want to gain weight? Is it you want to lose weight? Is you want to just have a healthy relationship with food? What's actually the goal here, and what are we working towards? What's healthy for you in that specific scenario?
Yeah, look, for me, I think I tend to disagree personally. I don't really see many options for cereals working well in most people's instances. I really do see it as much more of a discretionary food. I don't think it really offers anything.
Do you include granola and things along those lines as a cereal?
Probably.
Pretty high fiber, relatively high protein if you had some nice little proteiny whey things.
Not really. Like, it'd be interesting to look at the per 100 grams. You know, pull it up. That can be something. If you want to prove me wrong, next podcast, feel free to pull it up.
Sure.
Or even now, if you want to, while I'm speaking, because in my opinion, they just don't offer anything. They're not doing anything productive. You know, and essentially, what is a discretionary food when we look at it at the end of the day? It just comes down to, it just offers you nothing. And the only thing it offers you is yum. So if the definition of discretionary foods is that, then boy, it's close, because it doesn't offer you any protein. Satiety's trash. Fiber's trash.
Fiber is 9 grams per 100 on average, by the way, Max.
For granola?
For like your average granola off the shelf that's not like full of added sugar.
Yeah, look, all I would just say would be good luck eating 100 grams as well on that too.
Oh, of course.
And also, like, what would the calories, like, I think, has anyone even come up with this? Like, this is fucking revolutionary. Calories per gram of fiber, like as a ratio.
Oh, I think it'd be a good conversation topic.
Because, like, for me, the ratios were out of whack in that the calories for granola per gram of fiber, sure, on their own, fiber, it looks great. Oh, high fiber food, blah, 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 you know, going on that. But it's shit because you're using up a ton of your calories to hit that fiber goal.
I think it's more so that the recommendations from fiber come from whole foods, which are high in fiber generally. So that if you're aiming for high fiber foods, you're generally aiming for things that are quite satiating in general. And the refining process often makes foods less satiating, meaning that you feel fuller from more food. It takes more food to fill you up. And then potentially the food inside your stomach tends to, let's say, dissipate quicker in terms of your hunger cues, and you feel hungrier quicker later on in time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess for me, when I look at which category I'd put those cereals in generally, maybe even, again, this is why it needs to be spectrum-based and not binary, but I'd be much more pushing the cereals towards the discretionary aisle of things. Granola might be a couple steps or one step over to the other side, but for me, they don't offer you anything. And if you're having that every day, that's significant. And Matt and I both, I'm sure we've spoken about before, and if we haven't, we will speak about in future podcasts, that all it is those tiny things every day. That's what really adds up. Most people aren't in a big calorie. You look at people who are overweight or obese, and people assume, God, this guy must eat heaps, but it really isn't. It's just this person's eating an extra 50 calories a day, 100 calories a day for 10 years, and that's how you become obese. So those small decisions of, should I have cereal in the morning or should I have yogurt? Boy, do they add up a lot over the years.
Absolutely. And that's probably where my practice is definitely tailored towards making small changes over the long period. Just like we've had, like, we don't grow to be 2 meters tall in a day. We don't grow to be the exact opposite. We don't reduce that size in a day. Those small changes over an extended period of time make huge differences. Like, what did we work it out to be, Max, that the average difference between someone who is of like a healthy BMI range and someone who is of the obese range tends to be what, like a chocolate bar in terms of energy per day or something similar to that?
Less. So it's really easy to run the numbers, and it's good thing is because we know calories work. Because it's just a fact that they work, you can run the numbers yourself. It's super easy. You can even do it in your head. I'll do it on my calculator right now. We know basic things like one. I think we'll finish on this point. Yeah, Matto?
Finishing up, yeah.
Yeah. We know 1 kilogram of fat has 7,700 calories in it. So that's just, it's not exact, obviously. It's a best guess, but that's just the generally accepted amount. So if we go both people at age 20, one of them stays the same weight, stays 80 kilos, and the other guy turns obese and he goes to 100 kilos. So he's gained 20 kilos over 20 years at 40. So, okay, let me rephrase it. Sorry. Got two people. This is like the super ad. You know, the
Yeah,
C-bus?
compare the pair. Two people, same calorie intake.
We should, bro, that's going to be an Instagram post.
Sure. Sounds fun. Okay.
I'm going to be going up the elevator.
Sure. Okay. Sounds
good. So, anyway, compare the pair in that they both are 80 kilograms at 20 years old. One gets to 100 kilograms at 40. The other one stays at 80 kilograms, right? So the 80 kilogram guy is pretty much eucaloric, meaning that he hasn't been in a calorie deficit or calorie surplus for that entire 20 years. The other guy's gained 20 kilos. So it seems like he's been stuffing his face, right? Super easy to do the math on this. 20 times 365.25, because we have a leap year every. Did I show it right? 20
you showed it.
times 20 times 365.25. So there's 7,305 days that occur in 20 years, right? Get that number down, 7,305. That is easy peasy. Then we go, how many calories are in 20 kilograms of fat? 7,700 times 20. 154,000 calories. If we go 154,000 divided by 7,300, imagine if it's a big number. It's not. It's only 21 calories. So guess what? In order to gain 1 kilogram per year, you only need to be in a 21 calories. This could be a really good Instagram post.
Absolutely.
In order to gain 1 kilogram per year, you only need to be in a 21 calorie surplus per day. Guess what is in 21 calories? Maybe a quarter of an apple, maybe like 2 bites of a banana, or like 1 mouthful of cereal. It's basically nothing. So what does that mean? The decisions you're making day to day, tiny decisions, that's what actually really adds up. For sure, you can make heaps of arguments. No, it's not that. It's the weekend. They have a bunch of food on the weekend. 100% could be that sort of stuff as well. But at the end of the day, on average, it ends up being a really small amount. And these people who are overweight or obese, they're not eating heaps more. It's a tiny bit more every single day.
That's definitely a small amount. I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's not just like a couple pieces of or a couple bites of fruit or anything like that. If you compare an apple versus a Cadbury chocolate bar or something along those lines, it's a lot easier to eat 3 chocolate bars compared to 1 whole apple. An apple's way more satiating. You're not likely to overeat on whole foods, which is kind of like that easier method of achieving your goals over that extended period of time is loading up on those satiating foods. So you're not going towards the more energy dense foods, which provide you that energy without that satiation.
100%. That's why it comes down to making those tiny changes, e.g. swapping out cereal to a yogurt. That cuts down the calories a little bit, keeps you a bit more satiated. So the next meal, you don't need to eat as much. And boom, you've just gone from being in a 20 calorie surplus every day to being in a 20 calorie deficit every day. And you're starting to lose weight. The end. You're welcome.
Thanks,
for us solving all your long-term weight goals.
If only it was that easy, I think we wouldn't have much of a business.
Solving cancer.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It's just cell multiplication gone rampant, isn't it? It's simple.
We just solved obesity in episode 1.
Yeah.
Next episode, we're solving, what do you reckon, cancer?
Aging would probably be an interesting one to solve. It's pretty easy. Just like don't age. It's just a mindset.
We actually need to film Compare the Pair. So we'll talk about that with you individually.
Sure.
Goodbye.
Sure.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Cheers. Thank you so much for listening to the Real Health and Nutrition podcast. The sponsor of today's show is you. You support the show by listening and using our services of dietitian consultations and performance coaching. We offer in-depth one-on-one consultations to help you achieve your health and performance goals. Any random blog online can give you a generic meal plan where we here at R.E.A.L work collaboratively with you to reach your goals, making you feel heard and including you in your journey's planning. Our service offers tailored advice and can accompany meal plans and or realistic nutrition strategies, which can be booked via our website, www.recoveryexerciseandlifestyle.com. That's www.recoveryexerciseandlifestyle.com. Just a quick disclaimer, This podcast is for education, information, and general entertainment purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medical nutrition therapy or healthcare of any discipline. The content discussed in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute of professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please review our terms of use via our website. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.